New developments out of Syria this afternoon where chemical weapons inspectors are being denied access into Douma. Douma is the site of that suspected chemical attack by the Syrian government on its own people that killed 40, including women and children. In response, the United States, Britain, and France all launched those airstrikes on Friday night targeting 3 Syrian chemical weapons facilities. 2 of the sites were located southwest of the city of Homs, you can see there. The other just north of the capital of Damascus. At the Barza Research and Development Center, 76 missiles, 76 were used to attack that particular facility. This is the preliminary damage assessment showing the before, showing the after. A little difficult to sort of glean the damage, but you can sort of get a sense there. This is Himshinshar. This is a chemical weapons site. This is a storage facility that's just west of Homs. 22 weapons were used to target the site. This is the second before and after picture here. And nearby at the Himshinshar bunker, 7 scout missiles were used to destroy the facility there. You can get a sort of a sense if you look closely at the before and after. The Pentagon says that the bunker itself was successfully hit. I want to bring in Ambassador Christopher Hill now. Of course, the ambassador, former U.S. ambassador to Iraq, currently dean of the School of International Studies at the University of Denver. He is also an MSNBC diplomacy expert. Also with me, retired 4-star General Barry McCaffrey. He is an MSNBC military analyst. General, Mr. Ambassador, I want to play what the president said a short time ago. This is President Trump in Florida last hour talking about the strikes against Syria.
The equipment didn't work too well, their equipment, and they didn't shoot one. You know, you heard, oh, they shot 40 down, then they shot 15 down. They watched. Then I called, I said, did they? No, sir. Every single one hit its target. Hey, John, that's pretty good. I didn't expect that. I'm a little jealous. Are you giving him all the credit? Oh, you know, that means the end of his job, you know.
President Trump joking there at the end before that, though, talking about, by the way, he was making references, National Security Advisor, new National Security Advisor John Bolton there. General, let me start with you. Did the attack have any sort of measurable effect on Bashar al-Assad's ability to use chemical weapons in the future?
No. I think it was a significant military strike, competently carried out with no losses by an allied group, including our 2 most important NATO allies, France and the UK. In that sense, it was good. I mean, it was a strong statement that we cannot permit the re-legitimization of these terrible weapons, chemical warfare, against civilian targets in particular. On the other hand, look, scientific research on creating chlorine gas is zero. I mean, it's an industrial product. Sarin gas, the old Soviet GB, is easy to manufacture if you've got a third-tier chemical lab. So I can't believe they didn't already move substantial amounts of munitions to populated areas. So we're not talking hundreds of metric tons of chemical weapons, such as were used in the Iran-Iraq conflict, artillery delivered, etc. So I think it was a statement. It was not a significant military strike.
Ambassador Hill, what is, as you understand it at least, what is our strategy in Syria?
Well, it has nothing to do with Syria, this attack. This had everything to do with trying to reimpose some kind of deterrence and, frankly, to punish the regime for using these banned weapons in combat, actually not even combat, attacking civilians. So what does this have to do with Syria? Very little, because had he pitchforked to death children in Syria, there would not have been an attack on them. So this speaks to the fact that the president is prepared to deal with the issue of of breaking the rules with banned weapons, which I think is a very good thing, but he has not engaged on an obvious problem, which is we don't have a Syria policy, we don't have a Syria strategy, and in fact, from the president's perspective, it's to go out and get ISIS, which we've done a very good job of, and then to get out.
Ambassador Hill, you make a good point. I mean, here's a conflict, and you know, conservative estimates put the death toll at 250,000 people. Some estimates as high as 500,000 people. The lion's share of those folks killed using conventional weapons. Here's the other part of this, and we heard this from Ambassador Haley last week. we know that Bashar al-Assad has used chemical weapons dozens of times on his own people. We struck last April, we struck this past weekend. How are we deciding when to launch military strikes?
Well, good question. I mean, this was pretty overt, pretty clear. It was in a pretty concentrated area, and we found out about it pretty quickly. And I think the president took this as a challenge to himself, because a year ago he had done a raid and said they're not going to try this again, or if they do, he'd come back at them. So there wasn't much question that he'd come back at them. I agree with General McCaffrey. I think it was very important to do this with allies. That's a nice sign. But I think the real problem we have going forward is we don't have a Syria policy. This issue is getting worse and worse. We're seeing Iranian encroachment into these Sunni Arab lands. There's a lot of concern right now of where the Middle East is going, and we need administration to, how to put it, pay some attention.
General, we learned last hour there's going to be an all-senators briefing tomorrow on Senator by Defense Secretary Mattis. What might we learn from this all-senators meeting, if anything?
Probably very little. You know, I think Ambassador Hill's entirely right. There isn't a strategy. I'm sort of sympathetic to the administration. It's hard to know what we could do. Assad is on the verge of winning. The country is devastated. The regional Arab co-religionists, Sunni Muslims, you know, Syria being primarily a Sunni Muslim nation, 75% of the population, they're not willing to act. You notice the Europeans today said, yeah, we'll consider additional sanctions against Syria, but not against Russia. None of us have really amped up pressure on the Iranians. So you know, our Turkish ally in NATO is about to finish off the Kurds if we withdraw. It's really tough to see any political will in the United States to do something significant. I wish we would do something visible on helping Syrian refugees along the Jordan and Turkish frontier. Millions of people. We need to try and get a humanitarian element to this policy.
And it is quite the sight to behold. I was actually at one of those refugee camps last year along the border, the Jordanian border with Syria. Ambassador, as you know, there's talk of more sanctions now being imposed on Russia. Those sanctions could be announced as early as today. Is it reasonable to believe that these sanctions are going to have any sort of measurable impact on Russia or Syria?
It's probably not reasonable to expect these sanctions to have an effect on Russia. But I think we really need to hold the Russians accountable. After all, back in 2013, they said, don't bomb the Syrians. We'll take care of these chemical weapons. And they claimed with such fanfare that they had evacuated all these weapons. And sure enough, the Syrian regime is back at it. So I think we have to throw the book at the Russians. But I think we also need to understand that this is probably not going to solve the problem of Syria, nor the perception that the Russians stepped in and helped this terrible person, Assad, keep hold of that country.
Ambassador Chris Hill, always good to have your insight. Thank you. Glad you're here in the flesh. General McCaffrey, good to see you as well, sir. Thanks for your time this afternoon.